On Tuesday, the death toll there has topped 425, while the total number of infections is now above 20,000. That is an additional 64 deaths and over 3,000 new cases from Monday. And those deaths were all reported in Hubei Province, which is the epicenter of the virus, which has also seen over 2,000 new cases overnight. The Chinese government had previously said the next 10 to 14 days are crucial, as the virus is expected to reach its peak during that time. And all foreigners who visited the Chinese city of Wuhan or Hubei Province within the past 2 weeks will not be allowed to enter South Korea. This ban came into force today. Immigration desks at the nation's airports will be extra thorough, and the government has also laid out measures to make sure no one can get around it by closing down any potential loopholes. Kim Min-ji with the details.
South Korea will be stepping up measures to ensure the foreigners that have been to the Chinese city of Wuhan or the surrounding Hubei province are not allowed into the country. Starting Tuesday, South Korea will restrict the entry of those that have been to Hubei province within the last 14 days.
For starters, those that hold passports issued from the province will not be barred from entry, but visas issued in Hubei will be temporarily invalid. In the airline ticketing process, foreigners will be asked whether they have visited the province, and they will be subject to another check upon arrival through a health survey. After they enter, if any information turns out to be false, they will be forcibly expelled.
On top of this, any passengers that arrive from China, including South Korean nationals, will go through a special immigration process. Using a separate entry hall, they will be required to provide contact details in South Korea and can only enter if the details they submit are verified at the scene. The government plans to implement such procedures at major gateways nationwide, as well as ports as soon as possible. As for the issuing of short-term visas, the government says the matter is still under consideration.
China has suspended the issuance of visas until February 9th. We'll continue to discuss what to do regarding short-term visas and then make a decision.
In regards to expanding the travel restrictions, Kim said a decision will be made based on how the situation develops. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Health authorities here in South Korea are stepping up efforts to contain the coronavirus as the country reported 3 new cases on Sunday. Fortunately, though, the second patient is close to being discharged from hospital after showing signs of recovery. Choi Jung-yoon reports.
Now there are in total 15 cases of the novel coronavirus in South Korea, with 3 more confirmed on Sunday. The second confirmed patient is, however, being considered to be discharged from hospital. The 55-year-old South Korean man who came from Wuhan and tested positive last month is reportedly showing signs of a full recovery. The authority is using the polymerase chain reaction technique to detect whether the virus remains in the patient's system. If the results come out as negative twice within 24 hours, the patient is free to go. The patient in question has tested negative and is being monitored closely. Regarding those exposed, the Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention announced 913 people have been in contact with the patients. But as of Monday, the monitoring has been lifted for 45 of those who were in contact with the first patient. If nothing unusual is found, a further 75 who have been in contact with the second patient are expected to go free this Friday as well. South Korea had previously been separating those who had contact with the patients into 2 groups, intimate contact and daily contact. But now, regardless of the amount of the contact, all will be isolated in their homes for 2 weeks under strict monitoring. Local government officials will be paired one-on-one with those who have had contact with the patients and will supervise and support them. Choi Jung-yoon, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in is holding a cabinet meeting this morning to discuss pan-ministry response measures against the coronavirus outbreak. He's expected to be briefed on the latest developments and measures taken so far by the country's health ministry. The meeting comes as South Korea has imposed an entry ban on foreigners that have been to the virus-hit Chinese province of Hubei within the past 2 weeks. Eyes are on whether they'll expand travel restrictions to other parts of China as well. The head of the WHO has reiterated that countries should not suspend international travel and trade, despite the fact that the new coronavirus is spreading at a fast pace, at least in China. He also expressed confidence that countries, if they can pool their resources together, can successfully manage the outbreak. Kim Hyo-sun reports.
Despite the rapid spread of the new coronavirus, the Director General of the WHO has once again urged countries not to close their borders to foreigners traveling from China or to suspend trade. The remark is in line with what he explained last week, as the agency declared a public health emergency of international concern, but did not recommend restricting travel and trade to China.
There is no reason for measures that unnecessarily interfere with international travel and trade. We call on all countries to implement decisions that are evidence-based and consistent. WHO stands ready to provide advice to any country that is considering which measures to take.
Speaking at the opening of the agency's executive board meeting on Monday, the WHO chief said that small number of cases outside China can be managed without countries resorting to extreme measures. He also explained that the disease was mainly declared a global health threat out of concern that countries with weaker health systems would have difficulty in containing the virus, which can spread from person to person. Against this backdrop, an international team of experts led by the WHO could go to China as early as next week to investigate the new coronavirus outbreak. According to Reuters, the team could include American medical experts who will be cooperating closely with Chinese experts upon the agreement with China and the WHO. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Now, in other global efforts to contain the spread of the coronavirus, G7 member nations will make joint efforts to combat the outbreak. The health ministers of the G7 economic powers held a video conference on Monday where they agreed to coordinate their approach on travel restrictions, precautions and research into the virus. They also vowed to cooperate with the WHO, the EU and China. The German representative said international or regional efforts are necessary as a virus knows neither borders nor nationalities. He's slated to hold a separate meeting with his British and French counterparts on Tuesday. Now, with stronger measures in place to protect yourself coming into contact with someone carrying the coronavirus, preventing human-to-human transmission is now very closely under the microscope, so to speak. Our Isung Jae has some tips on what you can do to protect yourself if you suspect someone in your household is sick.
Self-containment refers to literally quarantining someone suspected of a virus infection at home and preventing them from going outside. There are many things to keep in mind when a person and their family share the same space. First off, it's highly recommended that they use a single room, meaning if you have your own room, you should be the only one using that space. If that's not the case, use a separate bed or at least stay 1 meter away from the other person sharing the room. Shared spaces such as bathrooms and kitchens should have the windows open as often as possible to release any contaminated air. Instead of towels that family members share after washing their hands, it's recommended that disposable paper towels are used instead. While carrying a handkerchief is good, it's advised that you dispose of it after a day's use. If you don't want to throw it out, it's recommended that it's washed using laundry detergent and machine, washing it at 60 to 90 degrees Celsius. You must always wash your hands after discarding your face mask and disinfect areas you touched with your hands.
In particular, things like doorknobs and office supplies are highly likely to spread the virus. It's important to wipe those surfaces with disinfectants 1 or 2 a day.
Parents taking care of children who may be sick should also follow strict guidelines to protect themselves. It's important to wear a medically approved face mask that fits you and your child's face. If any member who's being self-contained develops acute respiratory symptoms, fever, or shortness of breath, you must dial 1339 right away. It's important that anyone who shows symptoms to stay at home until the health agency confirms the symptoms have gone. While it's more difficult for newborns or parents of newborns who may show symptoms, the Korean Medical Association says it's important for the sick infant and their parent to be self-contained together. 이승재, Arirang News.
Now we're going to start our international news in the United States. The Democratic Party caucuses in the state of Iowa have officially kicked off for the 2020 U.S. presidential election. The winner in the end, after this long process, will take on President Trump. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Yoon Jung-min. Jung-min, tell us more.
Sure, Mark. As you say, the Iowa caucuses officially begin on Monday night for the November presidential election. There are 41 delegates up for grabs at nearly 1,700 caucus locations statewide. They also have satellite locations to encourage more voters to join. On the Republican side, it's almost certain that President Trump will be running for re-election this November. On the Democratic side, however, almost a dozen candidates are in the running. Among the leading candidates are former Vice President Joe Biden and Senator Bernie Sanders. Other Democratic candidates also include Senator Elizabeth Warren, Mayor Pete Buttigieg of South Bend, Indiana, former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, and many more. Iowa only represents 1% of the total of 4,750 delegates at the Democratic National Convention, but it gives useful insight which candidate might actually compete against President Trump at the national level in November. The United Nations has brokered talks for two warring factions in Libya to end years-long conflict in the country. The UN said in a statement on Monday that 5 officers from Government of National Accord and other 5 from Libyan National Army of Eastern Commander Khalifa Haftar met for talks in Geneva. Libya has been going through years of war since two sides have been fighting for power since longtime dictator Muammar Gaddafi was killed in 2011. Uganda is considering the possibility of opening an embassy in Jerusalem. The move is deemed internationally as a support for Israel over its claim for the city as its capital. The remarks came during Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's meeting Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni during his visit there. Netanyahu added that Israel will open an embassy in Uganda's capital, Kampala. Since U.S. President Donald Trump moved the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem in 2018, the issue has been highly contentious as Palestinians have strongly opposed the move. A deadly shooting incident took place on a Greyhound bus in California on Monday. Police said a man opened fire on the bus with 43 passengers on board in the early hours of the morning, killing 1 woman and injuring 5 others. The suspect is in custody, but the motive remains unclear. Authorities say it doesn't seem to be terror-related. Police added they were able to apprehend the suspect without further incident due to some heroic acts by passengers.
OPEC is reportedly considering cutting oil production by up to 1 million barrels a day amid the spread of the new coronavirus. The Wall Street Journal reported Monday that the move comes as there has been a rapid drop in crude oil consumption in China, the epicenter of the outbreak. Various scenarios are under consideration, including all oil-producing countries cutting their production by an average of 500,000 barrels per day, or just Saudi Arabia temporarily cutting daily production by 1 million barrels. OPEC is set to make its final decision next week in Vienna. South Korea's consumer inflation last month was more than 1% for the first time in 13 months. Statistics Korea says the country's consumer prices increased 1.5% on year in January, thanks to higher prices of agricultural and industrial goods. Prices of agricultural, livestock and fisheries products went up 0.6%. Core inflation, which excludes food and energy prices, increased 0.8%. Now, we continue a three-part special we've been doing on how South Korea has been responding to the export curbs Japan first imposed on Seoul all the way back in July of 2019. For our second part, Ji-young sheds light on how South Korean firms have been dealing with the situation.
Last July, Japan imposed unprecedented export controls on materials used for the production of chips and displays, namely photoresist, hydrogen fluoride, and fluorinated polyamide. Many were concerned because the export curb could affect local chip and display makers, especially small and medium-sized firms. Korea Federation of Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises distributed a press release in July saying that 6 out of 10 small and medium-sized firms in the semiconductor industry are not likely to last more than 6 months due to Japan's export controls. Despite the concerns, no serious damage was experienced by domestic SMEs, according to an expert.
No major damage was reported because Japan did not expand its curbs on other items and withdrew some of the control already imposed. The Japanese government now understands that the export curbs harm its firms.
Some domestic small and medium-sized firms have succeeded in producing the 3 key materials subject to Japan's export curbs. IT Chem is the first South Korean company that managed to localize 2 of the core ingredients of the colorless and transparent polyamide, or also known as CPI film. Before Japan's export curbs, many large domestic conglomerates that produce CPI films have been purchasing those core ingredients from Japanese firms. However, after the curb, many domestic conglomerates have turned to IT Chem to purchase them.
Due to Japan's export regulations, large display makers started to consider using our products, so it served as a chance for us to enter the market and expand our market share.
According to the expert, local companies like Solbrain and REM Technology have also been developing technologies to produce high-purity hydrogen fluoride and have succeeded in localization. The CEO of another company, Nextin, that succeeded in localization of the equipment that detects defects in semiconductors said, having faith in local companies and giving them opportunities is very important for further localization. Ji-young, Arirang News.
Now, K-pop supergroup BTS has released a second trailer for their upcoming 4th album, Map of the Soul 7, named Outro Ego. The trailer features an upbeat solo track from member J-Hope. It uses samples from Too Cool for School, which is the title track of the band's debut album from 2013. Map of the Soul 7 will be released worldwide on February 21st. Now, X-rays are commonly used to look inside the body, but come with a risk of radiation exposure. Everyone knows that by now. Now, Korean researchers have developed a technology that can reduce that exposure to less than 50% of normal levels while allowing high-speed imaging. Park Se-young with more.
X-rays are a common way to view and diagnose medical problems. However, they come with worries about radiation exposure and problems concerning image clarity. Now, Korean researchers have found a way to transform the more than 120-year-old method by developing digital X-rays.
Unlike analog X-rays, it can be quickly turned on and off at the desired time. This reduces any unnecessary exposure, making the image clearer and reducing X-ray exposure.
The researchers use electrical signals instead of conventional electro beams that generate heat. Because electrical signals directly control the electrons being released, X-rays are only released when needed, reducing the radiation exposure to less than half of an analog X-ray. The technology can also capture images more than 10,000 times faster and more accurately than the current X-ray method.
By reforming the analog X-ray source, which depends entirely on imports, this will be an opportunity beyond just localization to take the lead globally.
The technology, published in numerous journals, has been transferred to local firms for commercialization. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
Good morning. Today is the start of spring, 입춘, according to the traditional calendar. But it feels like midwinter has returned. Most regions had a sub-zero start to the day, while parts of Gyeongsangdo and Gangwon provinces are still under cold wave advisories. But highs will rise rapidly to positive territory, going a couple degrees higher than yesterday. Seoul getting up to 4 degrees, Gyeongju, Jeju, Gwangju topping out at 9 degrees this afternoon. What's more, there's snow in the forecast. Central western regions will see snow from this afternoon. Southern regions will receive snow from tonight into tomorrow dawn, seeing 1 to 5 centimeters. So many roads could be coated with snow and ice overnight due to freezing temperatures, because tomorrow is forecast to be the coldest day of the season. So plan accordingly if you have a travel schedule for next couple of days. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all the news and weather we have for now. Stay tuned to Arirang TV. Our next newscast is at noon Korea time. So until then, goodbye.